expensive to say the least. But I was so eager to read it and then to get through it and to tell people about it, because as I read the book, I was like, this is amazing. I'm learning so much, and there's so much I want to share with other people that I know can also benefit from this kind of knowledge as well.
Created by the incarnation, which means there is a logos to the universe, which means if you access that, then imitation suddenly takes on a whole new dimension, because you can get to the inner meaning of the universe by imitating. If you think about it long enough, if you meditate and you have the talent to do this. And so that's what happened in the visual arts, but it also obviously it became more and more realistic as time went on, as the skill developed. But it also happened in music, and people don't understand it as easily. Going from Bach, his well-tempered clavier, where he basically solved the problem of the circle of fifths by changing the tuning from a natural tuning to a tempered tuning, which would allow you to modulate all around that from one key to another. And this was a great breakthrough, because modulation is one of the basic things that, I'm saying, from one key to another, like D minor to C. A minor key is like, it's a little bit melancholy, the sun isn't shining, you switch to a major key, suddenly the sun comes out behind a cloud and you have a whole different emotion. This is what happens when you change key. And now it can be used to describe the motions of the soul in a way that was never done before. And the man who realized this was Beethoven. And so now he could modulate and bring it back together, and you had an extremely intense emotional experience by listening to his symphonies, literally. Now,
one of the things I really value about your knowledge, Dr. Jones, is you're able to pull from so many different literary sources, and it's wonderful. And one of the things that comes to mind as another contrast is one of the things you brilliantly pointed out with Jack Kerouac and On the Road, and this was months ago in one of your shows, and you had pointed out how there was like this epiphany for him when they're all in Mexico and drinking, they're playing the music loud, driving their car, and they're dancing in Tijuana in this bar or whatever. And then Jack Kerouac, he hears in the background a baby crying. And then it kind of, there's like this moment where it's just like, wait a minute, my actions, this sexual liberty has consequences. There's consequences, right? But we gotta get high. We gotta put the music on. We've gotta talk about, whatever beatnik culture what was going on at the time, and communist leading, instead of talk about consequences of the conduct that is happening as a result of this wanton sexual liberation that was that was happening.
Yeah, well, Jack Kerouac was a French Canadian. They came down to work in the clothing or shoe factories in Lowell, Massachusetts. And then he's comes into his own right after the war, writes a novel, and then he starts hitchhiking across the country, and there's this kind of reaction against, I think, American militarism. But the main vehicle for his loss of identity was the Negro. If you go to On the Road, there's a passage in there where he said, I was walking in twilight through Denver, the Denver twilight, wishing I were a Negro. What's that mean? Well, you mean sexually liberated, because at that point, the main vehicle for this paradigm, the Negro as a paradigm of sexual liberation, was jazz, which had come into being during the 1920s. Jazz was Jewish creation. There's no question. It was a cultural artifact from black people, largely people in New Orleans who had picked up Civil War instruments and started to create their own kind of music, and it was almost immediately appropriated by the Jews in New York City, and they became the determinant. The Harlem Renaissance became the determinant of Negro identity, which was basically sexually liberated. That's exactly what Jack Kerouac imbibed from listening to jazz.
Really quickly, geist of like, okay, we have this idea of marriage, there's some sort of sanctity, but it's disregarded, and so it becomes like this legal contract. And then they come up, she said no, by the way, and she probably said no because it didn't seem right,
No,
and there was
right.
something to it. So They want to have their cake and eat it too. They
Right.
want the marriage, but then they don't want the things that have to do that makes a marriage successful.
So you're talking about a fundamental issue here. Brownson came to the conclusion that the only way you can demand fidelity in marriage is if you have a sacramental marriage in the Catholic Church. He said, because human passion is simply too strong, and you can't arrange this on your own. You can't just sort of live together and expect there's going to be a happy outcome. There is not going to be a happy outcome, because what's happening here is you're both growing, you're both becoming more and more egotistical, even though the fact that you're living together at a certain point, there is no communion. It's not a marriage. You're committing the sin of fornication or adultery or whatever sin. That makes you more and more selfish. And at a certain point, you get so selfish, you can't stand being with the other person, and you break up. That's the dynamic. Orestes Brownson said that you can only demand fidelity till death do us part if you have a sacramental marriage with the Catholic Church. Now, he said it. I understand what he's saying. I agree with what he's saying. And the move, as long as if you start moving away from that, you're going to have this epidemic of divorce, which is what we have now. Because it's very similar to what you said about forgiveness of sin. I don't need the church. I can just go into my closet and absolve myself from sin. No, it doesn't work that way. I don't need marriage. I can just live together with my girlfriend, and we don't need all this type of stuff. No, it doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way. And if you think you're going to do it, okay, you're going to wreck your life, because this is a crucial moment in your life where you have to make the right decision, and you have to confirm it in a public way and also in a spiritual way by getting married in the Catholic Church. If you're not a Catholic, you better become a Catholic. This is the whole message that I'm learning here from just doing this American experience thing. Americans thought, I can do it on my own. I can go off into the woods. Well, it didn't work. It still hasn't worked. And it's not going to work. So as you're getting down to the brass tacks here, the main enemy of marriage at this moment is the cell phone. Because it is a form of control. And the main...
All right.
Actually, I should have put my hat on again.
Yeah, we should have put our hat back
In
on.
München steht ein Hofbräuhaus.
It's all right. We're going to take a picture with our hats. Are you going to do a little Macbeth with your...
No, it's Hamlet, actually.
That's Hamlet, excuse me.
Alas, poor Yorick, I knew him, Horatio. People are going to have to make up their minds. Okay, you can claim you're Catholic because you were baptized, because your father came from so-and-so place, but you're going to have to start thinking like a Catholic. This is not just a DNA operation. This is a thought operation. And you're going to have to start thinking according to Catholic categories. And the gun is not a Catholic category. And race mixing is not a Catholic category. You're going to have to, logos is a Catholic category, and logos means speech. And if you decide maybe I should talk to these people, you may get surprising results.
Agreed, 100%, Dr. Jones.
Giger's, not Giger, but he's collaborated, but Alien.
Yeah.
Which is a collaboration of a lot of different people. So Hans Rudy Giger was the artist who created the monster in Alien. It was created by, Ridley Scott was the director. A guy named O'Bannon was the story guy who told the story. But it all came together as the monster, which is the expression of the sexual revolution of the 1960s. And so what happens is you have, this is in the 1970s, it came out in 1979. It's a comment on the early 70s, which is the high watermark of sexual revolution. In particular, the pornographic film Deep Throat, which is about oral sex. So oral sex was supposed to be funny then, but now by the end of the 70s, nobody thinks it's funny anymore. And now, this is what happens in Alien. It's hard to see unless you know the background, but basically that face monster sticks its penis down John Hurt's throat. Everything seems okay, and then suddenly his stomach explodes. This is the metaphor for what sexuality has become at the end of the 1970s. This is the consequence of sexual liberation. It's guilt, it's hatred of the portraying the fetus as a monster. And that is the result of abortion. You have to portray it as a monster because you killed your child, and so on and so forth. So they're the three that come to my mind.
Brilliant.
As opposed to Hadleyville, which is the town where High Noon takes place. There's no church in Big Whiskey. The big confrontation between good and evil is preceded by Marshall, the sheriff, going to the church and standing there in front of the congregation and saying, "I need help." And then he doesn't get it. And at that point, he's got to be the man all by himself, the single guy with a gun who's going to face down evil, which is the classic American trope. There is no church in Big Whiskey, which is the city where, the town where Unforgiven takes place.
Ned, you remember that drover I shot through the mouth and his teeth came out the back of his head? I think about him now and again. He didn't do anything to deserve to get shot. At least nothing I could remember when I sobered up.
No church, cops are all criminals, and the women are all whores. That's America. I mean, he was a genius. That is America. Tell me where I'm wrong. That was 1992. Has it gotten better since 1992? We are on the brink of war now because this satanic ideology is going to lead to destruction, inexorably. Julian the Apostate. His grandfather was Constantine. His grandfather basically allowed Christianity to become the official religion of the Roman Empire. Roman Empire is collapsing. Julian wanted to turn back the clock. And so he reverted to paganism. Now, paganism, what do we mean by paganism? We're talking about Iamblichus now, who is the cut of art, the state of art Platonic philosopher. And at this point, Platonism and magic are the same thing. This is where Platonism went. It went into magic. Magic is basically commanding. It's the opposite of prayer. You're asking God for help. Now you're telling God what to do. This is what magic is. Or if you're not telling God what to do, you're telling what the spirits are. And that was what Neoplatonism became. There's a convergence here. The Council of Florence, we're trying to save Constantinople from being invaded by the Turks. We want to resolve the conflict between the Eastern Church and the Western Church. Cosimo de' Medici invites all these Eastern prelates to Florence. And they bring with a guy by the name of George Gemistos. George Gemistos is the man who understood that whole Platonic magic tradition. And suddenly he's there in Florence, and Cosimo de' Medici wants magic. If you're in finance, George Soros says finance is alchemy, and he's right. And finance is basically, how do I make money out of nothing? And this is what Cosimo was interested in, so he said to Ficino, translate this stuff into Latin. And that's when magic got injected into the bloodstream of the European Holy Roman Empire of the Catholic Church. It was the Medicis that did it. And at a certain point, it starts, this gets transmitted. The guy who comes down from Germany, Reuchlin, which means little smoke, comes down, and he takes this magic tradition north of the Alps, and then suddenly it starts to spread, and then the man who picked it up eventually was John Dee in England. Now, at this point, it becomes weaponized because at this point, we have the Reformation, which is one of the most fundamental tragic issues in all of European history. It basically broke Christendom. It turned England into an anti-Catholic Judaizing power. And at the same time, when they broke with the church, they realized they had no legitimacy whatsoever. And once you have a regime with no legitimacy, you have to have a police state. And the police state was created by Elizabeth. In charge of it was Walsingham. And Walsingham hired John Dee to be his, consultant and state-of-the-art intelligence. He was an intelligencer. That's what they called CIA agents at that time. He was an intelligencer. And the state-of-the-art intelligence was magic. And that took over the police. And so the idea that John Dee had was he was going to use angels to spy on the Catholics and destroy Catholic power in England. Other people got involved. Marlowe got involved because he's contemporary of Shakespeare, and he decided he didn't like the idea. So anyway, long story short, magic became the official ideology of England. And the man who took it to the next level was Newton, who knew that he could. Magic was over. Okay, because the debate between Father Mersenne and Robert Flood, the representative English magic, Mersenne and Descartes just obliterated the English magic tradition. It had to make a comeback, and it made a comeback as science. And Newton was the guy who did it. Someone accurately called him the last alchemist.
And I want to circle back real quick. We know we're running out of time, but this goes back to what I said earlier at the start. See, when you connected it, science is essentially magic. And earlier in this conversation, I talked about these magical words, right? That tell the masses how to think and how they perceive reality. 6 degrees of space, right? It's always the words, it's always the numbers, right? Numerology is the whole thing. 6 everywhere, right? All kinds of codes, Masonic codes, 33, right? Our world is surrounded by magic, and it's like, we a lot of us can't see it for what it is, but it doesn't matter because our whether we know or not that it's magic, we give power to it. I think the more we participate, willingly or unwittingly.
Right.
But
science is the best cover for magic that the world has ever discovered. Call it science now, and buddy, science is real.
Right.
And if you don't believe it, I can show you a sign over in that neighborhood
right.
over there. It's right under Black Lives Matter. Science, or maybe it's on top of Black Lives Matter. I don't know, but that's the article of faith of this group of people. Science is real, which means they don't understand what they're doing. When you say science is real, what you're talking about is magic. And this instance of magic was magic.
Yep.
It was control.
Yep.
It wasn't science. It was a form of control. That's obviously the flip side of magic as my liberation, my power over. What do you mean when you say you have power? You have power over other men. Well, that's control. And that's what science has become. It's a form of control. This is what C.S. Lewis said. Brilliant book called The Abolition of Man. Best book he wrote.
Read it.
Best book he ever wrote. And he said, when you say power of science, man's power over nature, what you're saying is man's power over other human beings. And that is the whole point of science. It's libido dominandi. It's the dominating power. It's the dominating vice. It's the desire to dominate your fellow man, which is the constitution of the city of man. Augustine said there are 2 options, city of man, city of God. These determine all of human history. City of God, love and service. City of man has to be the opposite. What is the opposite? Libido dominandi, dominating other people for your benefit. It's like the difference between Christ and Dracula. Jesus Christ shed his blood so that you can have eternal life. Dracula sheds your blood so that he can have eternal life. These are the options, and the option of libido dominandi is science as a cover for magic.
I love it. Dr. Jones, that's a good reminder for your audience. If you haven't read Libido Dominandi, please do. Definitely.
What's up, everybody? It's Chicago Talk Show host. Thank you very much again for liking, subscribing, commenting. It helps a lot. I do believe my channel is shadow banned, but I appreciate your support. Made it to 1,000 subscribers, and I'm going to continue to bring you EMJ interviews as well as EMJ related content, book reviews, magazine article reviews, and things that he talks about on X as well. It's not always going to be related to this sort of content. I'm going to build other stuff as well, just Chicago happenings, this IRL stuff as well. So it's not always super serious, but this is the kind of content you can continue to expect from me. And let's have fun with it. We're on this journey together, so let's just get it and keep learning. Thank you so much.